Ahoy. You know, if there's one thing I hate, it's making decisions. I suck at it, because I'm worried if I make the wrong choice on what I have for breakfast, I could potentially end my bloodline. Ahoy.
Hello, sir. Your mother is on life support. Are we pulling the plug or not?
I don't know, turn it off and on. See what I mean? I don't know what to do in these types of situations, so you know what? It's probably for the best if I go the whole day without having to make any decisions. I'm just gonna sit back, relax, and play something. So now it's just time to decide what I want to play.
So The Quarry is an interactive horror adventure brought to us by Supermassive Games, a studio that specializes in interactive horror titles such as Until Dawn and the Dark Pictures anthology. It tells a story of a bunch of camp counselors who must survive a night at Hackett's Quarry as they deal with supernatural creatures and some pretty rowdy locals. The game features a star-studded cast that includes Justice Smith, David Arquette, Brenda Song, and Ted Raimi, all who did the motion capture themselves. Released on June 10th, 2022, The Quarry has been pretty well received, though some say it doesn't hold a candle to Until Dawn. I haven't played it, so The Quarry's interactive adventureness is going to be slightly compared to Telltale's catalog. Now, I came into The Quarry when one time I was at GameStop, I know, I'm ashamed, and saw this on the shelf and thought to myself, hey, this looks like Friday the 13th. Which wasn't a far-fetched idea because the game's creators all cited and took inspiration from classic horror titles such as Friday the 13th, Sleepaway Camp, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, along with a few others.
The Quarry is a story-based game, and the thing about story-based games is that it can be tricky to maneuver around spoiling the events that take place here. Now sure, this is a channel that spills the guts of any game's story. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is amazing. It has one of the best campaigns ever, and I don't even want to spoil what happened because this will leave its mark on you. So anyway, in Modern Warfare 3, after Shepard betrays and kills Ghost, but The Quarry is a game that people should enter blindly to probably get the full experience of not knowing what the hell's going on. So there will be plenty of spoilers in this video, but I will do my absolute best to keep it at a minimum. Oh boy. Ahoy.
Sir, she is not an iPhone. What is your choice?
Interesting, but give me 23 minutes and call me back. So anyway, with that, let's conquer my fear of decision making and see if we can survive a night in The Quarry.
Do I agree or disagree with the terms and conditions?
We're off to a bad start.
The Quarry begins with two counselors named Laura and Max driving to the Hackett's Quarry summer camp one night early, but then something on the road caused them to steer off and crash through the woods. While Max stays behind to repair the car, Laura decides to go look around where some really spooky things start to happen and she bolts it back to the car. Max and Laura then run into a very creepy cop who presses hard for the two to not go to the quarry, but they ignore him and head to the camp anyway. Once they get there, they find that no one is there, and when Laura sees someone trapped in the shed, she rushes to help them, but suddenly Max is attacked and mauled by an unseen creature, and Laura is tranked by the cop. Flash forward towards the end of summer and we meet the rest of our cast as they send off the kids. We get the spunky Caitlin, center of attention Emma, clumsy jock Jacob, shy girl Abigail, stud Nick, socialite Dylan, and last but certainly not least, Ryan, the stoic yet charming awkward kid who is played by Justice Smith, and I personally made it my mission to make sure he survives the night because I really like Detective Pikachu. Now, Emma and Jacob were the couple of the summer, but Emma calls things off with Jacob because they are attending schools that are multiple states away. But Jacob, not ready to give up on love just yet, decides to sabotage the car and trap everyone in the quarry for one more night so that he can have one more night with Emma and try to convince her to change her mind.
Yeah, he's a dick.
Now, the camp owner, Mr. Hackett, played by Scream legend David Arquette,
"The series is nothing without you,"
has a bit of an odd reaction to the fact that the car is dead. He leaves off spooked, telling the campers to stay locked inside the cabin until he returns in the morning, but instead they decide to throw a bonfire party. But the night starts to get freaky when we are shown that the counselors are being stalked by these weird hunters covered in blood and these weird monsters that are also running all over the place. It is up to us to take control of each of the characters and guide them to see if we can help them survive till morning. Now, the gameplay of The Quarry is us just making a whole bunch of decisions on what our characters are going to say and or do. The game is told in chapters, and in each chapter we are given sections where we are assigned a certain character and must dictate their actions by either selecting dialogue, quick time events, or exploring the environment. Now, I must give props to The Quarry because it did a really good job at making you think about every action or inaction. See, as someone who comes from The Walking Dead, a game that seems like you were dictating the story when really you weren't, I was surprised by how even my littlest actions were actually actively affecting what was going on. Like when we are given the option how to sabotage the car as Jacob and then the screen flashes at us that we chose in our path, it is done in such a seemingly consequential manner that you just want to scream, "What did I do?" And the best part, it actually does make a difference as you play down the line. And it's not just choices like whether or not I should take a teddy bear, but even parts where you are performing quick time events or mashing the A button also act as choices. It isn't like in other games where if you mess up you see your characters die and then the game has you reset. No, if you mess up you risk altering the story and even possibly killing off your character. Now something that does become apparent early on in the story is that we are dealing with these supernatural monsters that we later come to know were actually werewolves. You'll have to take their word on it because these look nothing like werewolves and have more of a resemblance to those ugly hairless cats. But yes, we are dealing with werewolves that only come out during a full moon, and if anyone is bit by a werewolf then they become cursed with eventually turning into one themselves. This adds to the plate of shit we gotta deal with, as not only do we have to try to keep these people alive, but we also have to prevent them from getting bitten, and if they do get bitten, then we have a limited amount of time to work with before they start turning into a werewolf, and now we have even more of these bastards out there. So basically, the story of the Quarry can go a lot of different ways. Out of curiosity, I looked up how many endings there were to this game, and that number came out to a juicy 186!
Jesus, Mary and jazz hands.
That is a lot! Now, the fact that the Quarry has you controlling a bunch of different characters was definitely exciting and kind of kept the action going, but it leads to some inconsistency. Like for example, Emma, when we control her, we can make her someone who's compassionate towards others, like her friend Abby who has a big crush on Nick, and even though Jacob is persistently trying to make things work between us when we don't want to, we still try to make Emma playful with him and go easy on the guy. But when we get up to the bonfire where the gang is playing an oh so spicy game of truth or dare, when we're not controlling Emma and she's giving a choice of kissing either Jacob or Nick, she goes and Frenches Nick in front of Jacob and Abby, which made me feel that all the effort I put to make Emma a decent fucking person was for nothing. But it's one of those unavoidable outcomes, and sure the Quarry has almost 190 goddamn way things can go, but the overall skeleton does have certain things that will happen, like Nick being the first person to be bit by a werewolf, or that there will definitely be a point where we venture out into a scrapyard to search for car parts. But it's all the meat on the bones that we determine, and considering that we have 8 or maybe even 9 characters that we control and make choices for, can make things go any and which way. Now the game lets us know with some static that we made a decision that kicks off a sequence of events, or we see the consequences of our actions paying off. Now, keeping up with 8 to 9 characters' actions can be a bit of a task, but thankfully at the pause menu the game lets us see exactly how things played out. By heading over to the path section on the menu, we get to see the choices we made and how it inevitably came to play. And something that I really appreciate is that each path is represented by a vintage horror movie VHS looking box, which is something that's really awesome and shows that this game is made for horror fans.
Now when it comes to interactive adventures, it's always the gameplay that eats the brunt of the criticism. So let's see what we got here.
Now whenever it's time for a dialogue sequence or some choice selections, we get an intense zoom in on the face and we are given only 2 options, and to select we must steer our stick in the direction of the choice and fill up the meter. Sometimes these are timed, sometimes these are not, but the extreme close-up at times is pretty effective at making the players feel somewhat uncomfortable. Plus, sometimes the characters make some stupid or creepy faces. Now, when you are given dialogue options, it'll tell you the premise of what you're going to be saying and the manner of how it'll be said, whether it's dismissive, annoyed, playful, sarcastic, etc.
Which is honestly a pretty nice thing to have, because I remember in The Walking Dead, I chose a dialogue option that seemed nice, but when it was said, it came off in a way that I actually didn't want it to at all. Then again, it is Telltale. It probably didn't matter. Now, I don't remember at which point it happened, but I do know for a fact that it did. I would look for it, but I'm not gonna scour through 3 seasons of this game just for a dialogue option that I might not even click, so just take my word for it. Anyway, back to the gameplay.
The game does have tutorials to offer with each gameplay mechanic, by the way, via these fun animated videos, so this gives me a checklist. First up is the quick time event. Things start to slow down, you see the button symbol come on, and then it'll quickly show a direction and we must act on it. It's not hard at all to mess one of these up, which is a bit of a complaint for me actually. Because again, this isn't a Telltale game where you mess up a quick time and you see a grisly death and the game tells you to try again. Here, messing up a QTE will actually affect the story in some minor and even major ways. You can actually get your character killed off this way or even get them bit. Now yes, while the goal is to see how many characters you can get through the night, but you know, the story gets more intense when characters are bit, for example, so it is kinda missing out. I would have liked for it to maybe be a little bit more difficult, but at the same time, I can see the double whammy here, as say you accidentally misclick and get your character killed, it sucks and it does feel wasted. But you see, those are the stakes with life and death situations. One bad f*** can get you killed. But hey, in the options menu you can make QTEs a bit more difficult, and I do recommend playing this way.
Now I bet you're wondering, why am I trying to make it more difficult for myself? I'm trying to keep these people alive!
Well, here's the thing, when a character gets bit by a werewolf, they have about an hour or two before they turn into one. In the meantime, characters start to gain abilities like regeneration and super strength. So if we are in a situation where a character gets badly injured, but they happen to be infected, that means the bite you sustained is gonna save your life. I'm telling you, this game can go so many ways with this route, so my desire to have QTEs a little more challenging isn't completely unwarranted. So besides QTEs, we also have these hold your breath minigames where our characters are hiding from danger and we must hold our breath by pressing A and wait for the danger to go away with the red bar on the side telling us how much breath we have. The screen will flash red, the controller will be vibrating, and you'll hear an intense heartbeat. Once all that goes away, it's safe to release and run, but if you fail, then you must deal with the danger. It's another easy event, as even if you start holding A immediately when it becomes available, you should have enough breath to get you through the event. Sometimes the game will give us something called an interrupt, where you have a limited amount of time to press A to see if you want to engage in something like climbing a tree or getting involved in a dispute. How does this differ from making choices? Well, say you're walking the street and you glance a quarter. You aren't deciding whether you will or will not pick it up, you're thinking if you should stop and pick it up. That explanation makes sense to me. If it doesn't for you, well damn, sucks don't it? We have a few combat sequences where we are armed with a shotgun and must aim and shoot. Again, this is an option that will have consequences. Being trigger happy isn't the best way to go sometimes, but more on that later. Now the last ounce of gameplay we have here is the traversing part, where we control our character's movement as they roam the area heading to their destination or finding items. Now, sometimes these parts can drag and the characters do move very slowly. You can make them speed walk by pressing the left button. It doesn't help much. But while we roam the camp, we have 3 types of collectibles to find. Well, 2 of these can be branched off as one really, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Evidence and clues. Clues are things we find around the camp, things that help build the story and lore of the quarry, which is fine, though a lot of these don't need to be registered as clues, like this sign on the dock that says not to swim without supervision. How does that help anything? The evidence collecting is us gathering proof of the events taking place to show the police later. I will explain later why this is useless. The last collectible to find is tarot cards, and boy, I can't believe I'm 12 minutes into the video and I've yet to talk about Eliza the Fortune Teller. So in between each chapter, we end up with this little hut with Eliza, who's pretty much our narrator slash guide throughout the game, providing pretty light commentary. Each chapter has tarot cards to find, and we find them by walking in a particular place to change the camera angle and reveal the card. Once the chapter ends, we bring any cards we find to Eliza, and she gives us a simple reading, which at first sounds like nothing, but if you actually pay attention, you'll see how she's actually talking about certain situations the player will have coming up, and even a bit of advice on how to probably handle it. We have an option to dive deeper, as Eliza will show us on a crystal ball a premonition of what would happen via distorted and rapid imagery. Sadly though, if we bring her multiple tarots, we can only view one of their futures.
Now this may seem like the game's taking away the whole point of choose your destiny if it has a narrator that's pretty much just trying to point you in the right direction, but let's take a deeper look into my crystal ball and see if whether or not things are as they seem. Don't be fooled. This lady is not an impartial party. Eliza's very much involved in the plot of the quarry and has her own agenda. The future she shows are outcomes she wants to see happen. Don't trust her. I think we can trust her.
So Eliza being involved in the plot may seem obvious, especially considering we see her lurking in the woods in the background all creepily. But at first, I didn't know what we were dealing with in the quarry, so my mind was open to anything. When I had an option to kill Spider, I didn't do it in fear that giant spiders were going to be the monsters, and I didn't want them to have a grudge. Plus, when you have Eliza telling you that not everything is as it seems, maybe she was trying to tell us not to assume that this scary lady was her. Now, one big issue I have with the quarry is that it doesn't have a real ending. Which is a really wild statement considering that earlier I said there's 186 of them. Well, they're not really endings, but more like different outcomes. Because here's the thing, the game is very well paced and told like a movie. There's an opening sequence with credits that's very movie-like, and almost after every chapter ends we get a bit of a musical score like it's the end of a Netflix episode. Which is why it's really a bit flaccid, the game just abruptly ends when the night ends. See, after all is said and done and your story concludes, we are taken to the old lady again, who will either berate us or congratulate us based on how the night goes. And then you get another musical score showing slides of all the characters and detailing their fates on whether they survived, how they died, or if they are still infected. It's done in a very fun sitcom-y way that has its charm, but regardless, this is where the 186 endings really comes in. It's just different possible combinations of these slides. It ends with a shot of police cars pulling up to the camp, and then it just cuts to the credits rolling and we have to hear a conspiracy podcast talking about the events of the quarry. Now the lack of an ending is actually really disappointing considering the journey that we see some of these characters go on. Like, even if you help save Jacob and Emma, you won't get a scene where they come together or anything and won't know what really happens with them. Same thing with Nick and Abby or Max and Laura.
Now for some of these, there are ways to get scenes where we do see these characters unite, but those usually involve things going wrong, like certain characters needing to die or even getting bit. Now I'm not asking for a 30-minute ending sequence because I'm reasonable to a degree, but give me something, even if it's small, like all the surviving counters gathering in or around the van, too traumatized to say anything. Like, that'd be something. Or at the very least, give me some kind of epilogue where Max and Laura get together if both of them survive the night. Instead, we get this shitty podcast, and let's just get to it.
So coming back to the whole evidence collecting portion, the tutorial for collecting collectibles emphasizes the importance of gathering evidence to prove the innocence of our characters when the cops arrive. But A, we never get to interact with the cops because again, the game has no ending, and B, all it really is for this podcast section because the two hosts will go through the evidence they received and discuss them. And if it sounds interesting, it's really not. Listening to this podcast pissed me off. They just take so goddamn long to get to the damn point, and listening to this whole thing numbs my brain. Plus, I don't care to hear them talk about the evidence because I'm not getting anything here that I couldn't get from the damn descriptions in the menu when you find them. If the podcast talked about the surviving characters and their whereabouts, I would have been somewhat satisfied, as at least I'm getting something on the characters that I just spent 10 to 20 hours trying to keep alive. But no, it's just annoyance on my end.
So yeah, the ending of the Quarry blows, but as the age-old saying goes, it's not about the destination, but the journey. And this was a pretty fun journey. It's really fun seeing how things played out, and it's even more fun when you start theorizing on how to dictate things to see if you can change the outcome of certain characters' fates. See, the thing about interactive adventures is while yes, there is the fun in the first playthrough of not knowing what's happening and you're completely venturing off into the unknown, second playthrough is fun too because with the benefit of hindsight, you can start making different choices and maybe starting to see how things will maybe play out. So from this point, I'm really gonna start spoiling what happens in the Quarry. So if you haven't played it and are interested in playing it, I do strongly urge to stop here because you should experience it blindly. The time I'm laying out here is the point you can skip to where the spoilers stop, so I'll give you a couple seconds. Okay, let's get to it.
So the story is that there was a carnival show that featured something called Silas the Dog Boy.
Wonder what that means.
One day, a fire was accidentally started by Mr. Hackett's two kids, Caleb and Kaylee, in an attempt to help set Silas free, but in the process, Caleb was bit and turned into a werewolf, and thus he bit Kaylee and Mr. Hackett. So the trio are cursed with turning into werewolves every full moon, and the rest of the Hackett family lurks the woods looking for Silas to kill him so it'll cure the trio. Knowing all this explains why Mr. Hackett lost his cool when the counselors got stranded because this day happened to be the day of a full moon. Same thing with Max and Laura at the start of the summer. They arrived at camp on a full moon and they ran into werewolf Mr. Hackett who bit Max, and it's also why the sheriff, who is also a Hackett, was so insistent on them not going to the camp. So throughout the game, the wolves that are attacking our counselors are Kaylee, Caleb, and Max, while the Hacketts are trying to capture the wolves while protecting the counselors. You learn all this as you go deeper into the game, and knowing all this information changes the perspective on how you play the Quarry. You start acting a bit more cautious around the Hacketts, but again, this is with the benefit of hindsight, because on my first playthrough, the last thing you think when you see these guys are, oh, they're here to help. Especially the brother Bobby, who's a gigantic hulking monster that looks so terrifying at times and is practically missing a Jason mask to sell the experience. The whole game he's a unit that slow walks towards you like a serial killer, but when you get up to chapter 9 and hear the line from him,
Ow! You stabbed me!
Yeah, fucking hurts, don't it?
I ain't never been stabbed before. Ow, it really hurts.
Dad!
your view on him shifts from being, oh f me, my ass is gonna hurt, to he's just a big dumb man-child.
Welcome back. So basically, yeah, the Quarry is not always going to be what it seems. And playing it back is definitely something you're gonna find yourself doing at some point. But there is one problem.
We don't have an option to skip dialogue, which is honestly pretty lame, so in sections where dialogue is always going to be the same, you'll be hearing it over and over again. To give some final thoughts on the menu, we have one tab here where we get a map of the whole camp. It's here just to give us an idea of the layout and to keep tabs on where everyone is. It's not really for navigating, cause in walking sections the game will not let you explore the whole camp, which makes sense. And also, whatever characters you're using gets a full zoom in on their face, which is pretty weird, but it's also fun because you can control their head movement using the stick. There's no reason for this, but you can have fun with it. Oh my god, is this really where you live? Holy shit, you own Chibi Robo?
I know!
So what else do we got going on here? Well, after beating the Quarry for the first time, we unlock the Death Rewind option, where if one of your characters gets killed, we can undo their deaths by reverting back to the decision we made that cost them their lives. But you see, sometimes the character's death doesn't happen from one choice you just made. Sometimes the choices you made much earlier seals their fate later into the game. So if you get one of those characters killed, the game will offer to take you back, but sometimes it'll take you back by chapters and void any progress you made since then, which sounds super unattractive. The game also gives us the option to jump into any chapter in any run you have saved, which is really useful if you liked a certain game but wanted to take a different approach from a certain point. We also have a movie mode where we don't have to touch the controller at all. The game just plays out the whole adventure, making its own decisions. Yep, take the decision making part out of the decision making game. I love it! You can choose which movie you want. Do you want to see one where everyone lives or one where everyone dies? We even have the director's mode where we can dictate each character's personality via these sliders. And based on how you know these characters, you can adjust accordingly and see if these characters would survive organically. Like with Jacob, I get the sense that under pressure he's more clumsy rather than erratic or adept. And with Abigail, I sense that she's more sympathetic in conversation rather than antagonistic. So yes, movie mode takes away all the dialogue options, QuickTime events, and such. I was wondering how they would handle walking sections, and the movie mode does a really nice job by covering it up by showing the characters interacting with the environment to show their progression through an area. Sometimes it can be a rough transition, but other times it's done pretty well. While I could be an elitist and say movie mode is a dumb idea because nobody's going to sit and watch this 12-ish hour movie, well, A, we are in a time where people will binge watch a whole Netflix series and kill a whole day doing it, and B, The Quarry is a really good watch. The story is interesting and the characters are fun.
Warm of bears?
Yeah.
Herd of bears?
Yeah, I've heard of bears, but
Oh my god.
Though I will say movie mode is probably better on PlayStation because those controls will just sit when untouched, which inevitably leaves you without a charge. Xbox on the other hand, if it goes untouched after a bit, the game pauses, which is definitely annoying for this mode. What else we got here? We can listen to the episodes from the Bizarre Yet Bonafide podcast.
I'd rather shoot myself.
Now there's an option for multiplayer.
Huh?
Yes, we can play online via this Wolfpack mode or do couch co-op. Basically, this mode has each player select the characters that they will be controlling. You can do up to 8 players, however, it is not something I recommend at all because one poor soul will have to control Nick, who, besides possibly Max, is the least playable character in the game. The mode can be fun, feels a bit more survival-y because unlike in single player where you can just control everyone's actions and keep everyone on the same page and cooperating, here you just gotta worry about your character and hope somebody's actions won't get you killed. I tried to join an online game. Yeah, can't say I'm surprised. You know, when I opened my box for the Quarry, I got a redeemable code for the Horror History Visual Filter Pack. This gives us the option to add a screen filter of either classic black and white horror films, the 80s slasher, or indie horror films.
It's okay to be underwhelmed.
It's fine. While I can enjoy the feeling of really making this look like Friday the 13th film, I'd still not pay $5 for these 3 options. Of course, the least interesting DLC this game has is the one 2K gives away for free. The other DLC is outfit packs that feature outfits from both the 50s and 80s. Now, I do like this DLC if I'm being honest. I am someone who's a fan of 80s slashers, and considering that this whole game is pretty much an homage to 80s films, having 80s outfits and even 80s filter is pretty cool. Worth $5? Let's just hope one of our characters doesn't spend the whole game with their outfit I paid for off. Damn it, Jacob.
So that's The Quarry, and I love this game so much. I've played through it 4 times prior to the making of this video, which is nuts, and I definitely do feel like I need to take a break from it. Not because I don't like it, but because I want to forget about some of the things, and hopefully when I come back to this in a couple months, it can feel fresh again. But besides all that, The Quarry is very well made. The cast, I think, did an incredible job. The game looks really good, and it has a lot of blood and gore if you're into that kind of thing. The soundtrack's really good. It's not really a game soundtrack, but it's more of a movie soundtrack, but considering that's what this game is trying to be, it's great! I highly recommend playing this if you hadn't yet, and I really do hope you skipped over the spoiler part. And plus, I think this game helped cure me of my fear of decision making. Here we go!
Sir, it's been 23 minutes, so what will it be?
This is gonna be a while.